right, welcome to Legacies, everyone. Legacies powered by Aveo, vapor devices, leaders in sustainable vape technology. I'm joined this week by David Côté of Northern Helm, J Supply. David, how you doing, man?
I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me on.
Oh, it's a blast. Listen, I'm so glad we could make it work. I had, a schedule shift and you had messaged me right as a message came in saying, "Hey, we need to readjust some things." I'm like, "David, do you want on?" And of course, you're like, "Yeah, let's do it." Of course, we run in similar circles, and I'm happy to have you here, man.
No, thanks for taking the time. Of course, I said this before we were taping that really enjoy the content. Love learning the different nuances and the different perspectives in the space because we can all get caught up in our own lives and the work that we are doing. So, like to hear Creed and like what he's looking for in a product
Yeah.
versus a number of other folks that have been on there. So it's been a good education for me.
No, I appreciate that, man. It's imagine for me, like I get to sit here and just, wax philosophical with some of these guests and understand the industry better, but also what makes people tick. I think is, the root of everything I'm trying to understand from all the guests is what gets you up in the morning?
Right.
Why are you doing this? And I get the kind of the theme of it all is we're still building something that's very new, even though we're what, 7, 8 years in now, and you've been here since the beginning. So I'm curious to hear your
Well,
story and what
beginning
led
of
you there.
legalization. I don't want to step on any toes of everybody that made the
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
legalization happen.
At
So
the beginning of legalization.
yeah,
Okay, all right. And originally you came in with Northern Helm, but you've got a ton of
Tokyo Smoke.
experience. Oh, it was Tokyo Smoke,
Yeah,
right? Oh my
yeah,
God. Yeah. See my
yeah.
notes.
Early 2018 in Tokyo Smoke.
2018. Okay, but let's go back first because you're a seasoned leader when it comes to CPG and retail and understanding that. And the industry seems to be hard on individuals that are figuring out retail as they go. Some of it's a passion project for some, I should say. For others, they they were dealers, right?
That's retail though.
Yeah, that's retail.
That is retail.
Understand the customer, and that's what I really want to hone in on with you, David, is understanding the customer. And I had joked with you before we hit record, was it just dawned on me this morning that retailers outside of government seem to hold the power. And we said we'd unpack that, and we can, but I look at it from brands can do everything, when it comes to a consumer, the brand value, obviously, the branding itself, aligning with a certain brand, that's cool. The air quote cool factor, right? But at the end of the day, retailers can make or break a brand when it comes to whether or not you're distributed or carried on the shelves. So I don't know. Maybe we'll weave that in. But
Yeah,
take us,
yeah. I'd love to dig into that more and some of
yeah,
the understanding there because I definitely have some high level thoughts on that, and I think you probably have some other nuances and details that will help unpack it further
yeah,
because
totally.
there are a lot of elements that weave through this whole thing of getting that product to a customer.
Yeah, and there's so many. I've been following a lot of the discussions lately. Seems there's some turmoil with sales reps and regional reps and being able to reach reps and or the companies and brands. And again, we'll get to that because with my notes with you, I wanted to unpack so much. So I've got my notes, but first, what led you to Tokyo Smoke in those days, and what were you doing prior to?
Yeah, awesome. And I think it actually weaves into what you were just saying there is at the end of the day, retail is retail and the reps, the products, everything needs to come to life in order for that end consumer of whatever product is, whether it's coffee, Ziploc containers, or cannabis. It needs to fit what that target consumer is looking for.
Mm,
So that has been a big learning as we've been going through cannabis and better understanding what that consumer is looking for and that consumer better understanding what it is they are looking for. And that's that catch 22. And we've talked about like the amount of time that it takes post prohibition of a product to be able to actually meet those consumer needs, both
mm,
from a production perspective and an output perspective. My whole career has been in retail, whether it was selling Ziploc containers to Loblaws and understanding what those negotiations looked like. And believe it or not, there was data fees involved in grocery. Learned that at a young point in my career. I had no idea that that would be something that would be talked about so
was that
much.
startling at the time when you like what we got to do what to get these on the shelves?
Yeah, it was in a very similar way as you're buying data, and the people that bought the data had access to make stronger decisions for what their consumers were looking for. And over time, that doesn't happen overnight, but over time, you certainly are able to really separate yourself from the pack. And that was what was going on there. So it certainly was part of my career. And then from there, I went back to school for a bit and then ended up at Accenture in strategy on retail. And it was post M&A integration. So it
Oh,
was,
okay.
okay, a couple CPG companies or a couple retailers come together. How are we making sure that we're focusing on the target markets and ensuring that the branded elements are coming together properly, while everything on the back end is just it's white space. It's all the same.
Mhm.
It's there's no reason why the finance group needs to be totally different for a Tim Hortons versus a Burger King. There, you can have that consistent finance, and in fact, you're going to do a better job with it once that is integrated.
That makes
Um,
sense.
so that was very much on the strategy side of things, but I wanted to get into the operations, and I ended up going off with one of my clients who was RBI. So I ended up in the field. Tim Hortons USA was central US, really
Mhm.
learning about franchising and dealing with large operators, small operators, and the nuances that come with that. And this is now we're getting into 2017, and cannabis legalization was coming down the line, and from many respects, just I had this massive respect for cannabis, and not just from the recreational side, but from the medical side, from the industrial product side of things, and just the importance of hemp in our history.
Mhm.
And the importance of cannabis in our history from a medicine perspective. But I'm a retail guy, so how can my experience fall into that category in some way? And was looking for groups that were doing a fantastic job with branding, and was speaking to Aaron Sauls, I
Mm.
was in undergrad class with. Not sure if you've spoken with Aaron, but
I know Aaron, but yeah.
there you go. Did a lot of he's done a lot of transactions. He's one of the smartest people I know. I was like, anybody I should talk to keep learning about this. Very
Mm.
interested in it. And at that time, he passed me along to Brian and Alan at Tokyo Smoke, and it was it it was like, light had been let in, like, the way these guys were thinking about it and thinking about what was going to happen long after legalization. There were so
Mm.
many people doing phenomenal work on getting to legalization, and Tokyo Smoke couldn't be what it was without that work and effort that was going on, but they were thinking about, how does the shopping experience look? How is it they have the cafes, and how do these cafes translate into stores?
Mhm.
And, of course, my background in coffee helped a little bit there. Or that maybe it helped open the door for me to get involved there, and I was fortunate enough to join that team in early 2018 in retail ops to design it, or help design those first operations out. So
Oh, wow.
yeah, it
That's
was a good
very
time.
cool. So, I mean, in those days, so you're working RBI, understanding the, the coffee landscape. But well, I mean, like 2017, we were still med. We were
Yeah.
talking about rec. Licensing framework was starting to shape up a little bit when it came to adult use. Ontario in those days, I mean, we were still, it was all going to be online. Remember it was right. And but Tokyo Smoke saw because man, I remember talking with Tokyo Smoke. This was via Ample, right? So they started rolling out the cafe model originally. They were all in on this. No, no, no. This is going to go brick and mortar. This is the way we see the future. Obviously, things shifted, right? And then I think it was the Ford government that basically, nope, scratch all of that, right? Because we went, what was it, online and through OCS only. Then
Right.
it was, well, no, brick and mortar OCS stores. And then it was, no, 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 forget it. Let's do lottery. And then it was, forget it all. Just if you've got money and you've got a location, it fits the municipality, but that took some time, right? So,
Well, I lived through that.
yeah, and so how early did you get a glimpse of what the future looked like that you're like, okay, yeah, this is the time. I think was it introduction with Aaron and speaking with Aaron and this is what's going on, or how did that roll out?
Speaking with Aaron certainly helped, was massively helpful, but I think sitting down with both Alan and Brian, that was like I came out of those discussions as like these people are on another level of anybody that I've interacted with in terms of where they're thinking about the future,
Mhm.
and recognizing like these are folks that came and the team that they were already gathering around them, coming out of like UBS banking, Harvard Business School, Google. Like these are people that gave up very lucrative careers to
Yeah.
take this on because they were going to run through walls and create something new. And when I joined them, Ontario was still, Ford hadn't been voted in yet. Ontario was operating through the OCS. There was no contemplation there. The goal was to keep the cafes open, to keep the communication going in case anything changed.
Mm,
And Tokyo Smoke was under Haiku at that time. So
right.
we had
Yeah.
Dojo, the grow in Kelowna. And the goal was to create a product brand, like create that Tokyo Smoke and Doja product brands. So have these flagship locations. The business had received license to open in Manitoba. So we were building out stores in Manitoba. We opened those first two stores in Manitoba on 10/17, and we did same day delivery on that day from those stores. Um, but while we were planning those out, that was when the Ford government got in, and then they announced that there couldn't be the ownership of an LP down to the retail store level.
Right. Right.
And during that time, of course, we sold to Canopy.
Hmm.
So there was a lot of things that happened in that first 6 months while I
Just
was there.
all this going on in 6 months, man. Like it
Yeah,
feels such a
I look
whirlwind.
back
It
at it,
still
there's a
is.
lot of excitement going on, exciting chaos, and like it really laid the groundwork. But with when that announcement came out, I was sitting at my desk and I'm like, well, this is a franchise model. There's going to be a
Mm,
franchise model here. And the guy I ended up working for afterwards through the whole thing, Adam Shadletsky, he was taking on the legislative framework there. It's like, yeah, franchising is how it's going to go. So that was where the deal with Kate's Group, which is now OEG,
mhm.
ended up happening on Tokyo Smoke in Ontario. And then at the time it was Tweed with Couche-Tard. So
Oh, right,
I
right.
was once I had done my time opening the stores, I got switched over onto that team to go create the back end of the operating model for the franchise operations with those two groups. So that was a
Wow.
blast. And seeing these behemoth organizations come in was like that was when we were like, okay, we've hit it. Like
Yeah,
this is
yeah,
an
yeah.
industry that is going to take off. Like you watch the
Right.
stock market go up and down, whatever's going to happen when you've got billionaire private equity and then Couche-Tard coming in and wanting to play in a meaningful way. That was
Mhm.
a realization, and it was kind of funny. Like these negotiations are going on at Denton's office downtown, and there's the one time where we're with Couche-Tard and we're like, we need a little breathing room to like actually think here. So it's like, okay, well, the Ford government at that time was going to allow each of us to, under each brand, you could have 75 stores. So it's like,
Right.
okay, Couche-Tard guys, so fantastic to deal with, but they were so well put together that you'd give them a question and they give you an answer in 2 seconds, and it was perfect. Um, like, okay, we need 75 locations. You come back with your top 75 locations in Ontario. We're thinking that we've got ourselves 2 hours to work on the other side of things. It was like 15 minutes later, they're like, we've got them ranked, and here's like 12 different ways we're looking at them and why it's important and what order we'll
Holy
build them in.
shit.
Like they were just their real estate team is so dialed in, and you would expect that. And they're like looking back at it with a group that's got 16,000 retail locations, because at the
Right.
end of the day, retail is retail. And sometimes people don't like me saying that because it's cannabis retail. It's like, no, we have an affinity for this product, and that is amazing. And we want everybody that works in our stores to have an affinity for that product. But the basics of retail need to happen regardless of what the product is.
Mm.
And of course, we were at the dentist's office when the Ford government then announced that they were going to do the lottery. And like on the Tokyo Smoke side, we were sitting on 37 leases. And
Gee.
it's like, all right, well, I guess we're going to get rid of a few of those.
Yeah.
And then the
Wow.
lottery process was what it was. I definitely spoke to a lot of people, a few of them that have been on the podcast
Yeah,
during that
yeah.
time.
Well, and I mean, it's thinking of that 6 month period, it was chaos. And as soon as you said that, with all that going on just in your own life and own business experience, I'm like, no wonder there was some balls dropped here and there. I'm not saying on your side or Tokyo, just in general, in the industry, period. Because it was moving a million miles a minute. And some of the early adopters that had come in, they weren't positioned or poised like a Couche-Tard. They just weren't even close to that. Um, but so retail is retail. I 100% agree. There's so many transferable skills, training opportunities, upsell, do this, stocking, how we analyze the data. There's so much. But and I love to ask this of almost anyone I can. Is cannabis CPG?
Is that a bad question to ask?
I'm just asking because I've had really intelligent answers from both sides that make me question my own sanity when it comes to the way that I view it.
I I believe that when the majority of people are referring to cannabis as CPG, the cannabis industry will have hit a level of maturity that we were all striving for at the start.
Mm. Mm. Okay. Very
Because
good.
that means that we're doing a good job understanding our customers. We've put a good supply chain in place. We are working with government agencies in a positive manner, not just sitting here complaining about things. And I'm not saying anybody is, but like,
Oh,
let's
there's
let's
people
have a
complaining.
yeah,
Like, there are.
let's have a conversation
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
where we are drawing talent in a similar fashion or trading talent with other CPG areas. And I think
Mhm.
that's been a big change for me since, say, 2019 versus now. In 2019, could not stop the LinkedIn messages from coming from people wanting to get into the space, and that was from
Yeah,
private
yeah.
equity, from other CPG areas, from banking, from consulting. And I think now a lot of talent is going the other way, for reasons that we've seen. We've seen a lot of companies decrease in size, but now we aren't the same draw. So I think that
Mm.
we're going through a little bit of an ebb and flow situation, and when we get back to a happy medium there, we will be more of a mature state.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Something very interesting there, man. I think in mature industries, that's where you do see that ecosystem of, everyone's working together properly. It still feels a little bit like the black market. And I don't sit in this gray market bullshit area. Like it's either black market or it's regulated. That's the way it is. And as a former black market operator, I'm okay to say that. But I didn't sugarcoat it either, thinking, oh, what I'm doing is semi-legal. No, it wasn't. Period. But it
And I
still
love that I
feels
love that stance on it too. Like,
well, there's no
phenomenal.
now, don't get me wrong, there is in the area when we speak gray areas, Robert Laurie helped me with this a lot, is in the indigenous side.
Yep.
Understand like there are I don't even like touching it. It feels wrong to even touch it because I don't know enough about it. And if I don't, I either get someone that's more experienced like Robert or I just leave it alone because I don't know enough. Now,
But I would argue that that is more tied to the overarching, uh, regulations and
oh
laws that are
yeah.
in place,
Yeah.
not necessarily cannabis specific
Totally,
on that front.
100%. Yeah, I agree with that, 100%. So when we're talking about the evolution of retail versus, traditional CPG, we're still a little ways away. But that's what I was kind of getting to was it feels like we're just trying to like so from a brand side, you've got someone growing, let's just say they were growing illegally, they need to move product. It still feels like that in very much, I don't know, 25-35% of the industry where I'm growing it. I'm pheno hunting. I've got fire flower. I've got some great products. Just take it. Take it, retailers. Where it's a completely different model when you are a mature brand, you're running a company, and this is where I'm starting to see some that are going to get left behind. Last week I had Zachary George on SNDL. They have a bunch of brands. They operate completely differently. Now, don't get me wrong. I don't want to see craft product or anything like that ever go away. But in order to kind of reach peak velocity with your SKUs, you've got to get mature. So what is changing? What still needs to change when it comes to traditional retail and where we're sitting with CPG?
I think we're part of the part of the natural evolution right now. And never like to compare directly to alcohol because I don't think cannabis is like alcohol, but I think the prohibition lifting and the regulatory frameworks that were put in place were very similar along
Mhm.
the way. And if you look right after prohibition was lifted, in the US, the number one selling SKU were very high octane whiskeys and frankly moonshines because
Yeah.
it was
Yeah.
all supply chain driven. It was
Mm.
what is the easiest to produce, what is the easiest to ship, what is the easiest to get to location.
Mm.
After every couple years of product iteration, you look 15 years later, and the number one selling SKU in most markets was either a Budweiser SKU or a Coors SKU.
Hmm.
And so you're going from a level of alcohol content that can't be measured in some cases or not accurately measured down to 5%.
Mm.
And there's everything in between in the market. So we're 7 years in, but realistically with a lot of the frameworks we're 5 years in, 6 years
Yeah,
for
yeah.
from a
Yeah.
concentrate perspective, a 2.0 perspective. So we've got a few iterations of product refinement to happen before we really have what's there. And even in whether it's beer or coffee or clothing, there is still the craft market. And there
Right. Yeah.
I think a positive sign of any industry is having that craft market because that's where innovation comes from.
Mhm.
Like what Pepsi just bought another one of these kombucha brands for a
Yeah,
couple
yeah.
$1 billion, and it's like, because internally you're not going to have the same level of R&D that somebody that sees an open space in the market that really, really loves the product that they're making is
Yeah,
going to
yeah.
find. And that's a beautiful thing in any CPG market. So that's from the product side. And I think from the retail specific side, like, I can get into like very granular detail about the Ontario rollout because it's like involved in it heavily from the lottery perspective, on each round, and then in rolling out stores after the lottery, and have been very fortunate to be involved with a number of different groups, and founded Northern Helm in 21,
Mhm.
with J Supply, joined them in 21 too. Um, but we're really at the end of the first 5-year term on many of the leases that were signed in Ontario,
Mm.
in the back half of this year and the start of next year. So if somebody put their life savings or put a personal guarantee on a lease, they're likely not going to walk away after a couple months. And
Right.
then
Yeah.
you ask the question, well, why do we end up with so many stores on Queen Street? Well, I'm not pointing blame at anyone. I think the regulators actually operated with the best information that they had at the time. Um, but part of the system that was in place was that if I had a lease and you had a lease, we could be next to each other, but we had to sign those leases before we applied to the AGCO to get a
Yeah.
license.
Right.
And we had no idea that we were next to each other if they were different landlords. It's different when you go into a plaza and you say, okay, I want exclusivity on cannabis retail in this plaza. That's a
Mhm.
semi normal thing to ask for. The plaza also doesn't want to see two cannabis retailers in their own plaza when they own the whole
Right.
thing. So we could be next to each other. Then, in order for us to show up on the AGCO website as having applied for a license, we needed to go do our canvas, do our security, create a vault. We needed to put real money into that lease and have
Mhm.
taken over the space. So we're now
Right.
months in, likely locked in $100,000 plus, or a lot more in some of these Queen Street locations, against our personal holdings to make
Mhm.
that happen. And we're stuck in it for at least 5 years. And then on the same day, we show up on the AGCO website, and I'm like,
Yeah.
well, do I just close up shop and say, well, Tom won?
Yeah.
Or do I open my doors and I compete? And like, it was fun listening to Mike from 1922 talk about that. Like, you're either going to compete or you close your doors. Those
Right.
those
Yeah.
those are your options in
Yeah.
that situation. And what's going to be cool is like, yes, I recognize that some leases are 10 years, but a lot of 5-year leases out there, when those cycle, you will end up with the stores entering the right locations based on where the consumer demand is.
Mhm.
And in Ontario, you could say, okay, well, we basically had a flat number of stores for the last year. There, we track it on a monthly basis. We're basically flat year over year.
Yeah.
But this where the stores are already fitting in better where customers are shopping,
Mm.
because maybe 5 years ago the plaza wasn't available. Maybe 5 years ago the plaza wouldn't allow the cannabis in there. Maybe it's a new plaza with new customers coming in. Maybe Mississauga opened up and another region has opened up, and it's going to better fulfill what the customers are looking for and where they want to shop. So maybe we have the right number of stores. They're just going to be spread in a different spot to better
Mhm.
serve those end customers.
That makes sense. That makes sense. Man, I've never really thought that there are gonna be a lot of leases coming up, and yeah, some tenures. We'll see what that looks like. Oh, man. I never really thought now, I don't even know from the AGCO side, maybe they could have run a applicant search first or something. I don't know. I don't know what to change. What could have changed that. But you're talking about consumers and stuff too, right? So I am curious because there's so much data available now, right? And good, bad, ugly. Like what are you using to understand the consumer themselves and gain those consumer insights that actually help you as a business operator? Because again, you're getting wholesale data, you're getting if you're subscribed to say a turf or headset or whatever these other ones are, which some are a little bit more for brand side, but how are you understanding the consumer more?
Yeah, I think that's something that we grapple with every day and definitely want to continue improving. I think it's worth noting just on that regulatory piece that you commented on, like things that the AGCO could have done better. They were operating pretty quickly too, and
Oh
I
yeah.
I,
Yeah.
I think like as much as we were all in it, like, oh, I wish this was better. It's like, no, they got it out. Like
Right.
they hit the commitment that they said, and they got it out. So
Yeah,
I'm pretty stoked on that, and we have the freest market of any of them in Ontario. And
this is
yes,
true.
there are nuances and differences that we can say would happen next time, but that's the beautiful thing about learning from a market. It's how can we do it again next time when it rolls out. So I think I just wanted to level set with that. And from when we're looking at the customer, so let's look at it, when we were launching Northern Helm, because I was fortunate to be involved in Tokyo Smoke when we were looking at the customer profiles and how we're looking at those customers, and then opening the doors and working the cash on day one of opening those Tokyo Smokes is like, well, it's everybody.
Yeah.
Like, it was so funny. Like, we had really honed in on it, but it's a question of who are you speaking to,
Yeah.
and yeah, I'm involved with a consumer analytics business and have been for a long time, and which was one of the companies that actually helped create those original profiles for the consumer
Mm,
within the cannabis space. So when we were stepping back and okay, had done Cannabis Jacks and sold my portion of that, what do we want to do with Northern Helm? And it for me felt like the market was all focusing on a very similar person in terms of who they were speaking to, and it was the mid-20s male. A lot of the market
right.
was speaking to that. Tokyo Smoke was doing a good job of speaking to the higher end female,
Mhm.
not higher end, the more cool female, if you will.
Right, right. Yeah.
Um, I'm not cool, so I have no idea what that person's like, but uh, I stepped back and it was like, what does Loblaws do better than anybody else? And that was something
Mhm.
when I was 22 years old on the Loblaw account. They're they knew who their customer was. They
Mhm.
knew who she was. They knew that she was 35 years old. They knew what color her Subaru was. They knew how many kids she had, what she earned every year, what activities she did on the weekend with her kids and with her family, and the fact that she liked wine a couple times a week, but also really liked exercising. They knew her, so their communication is speaking to her, but they do an amazing job of speaking to their secondary and
Mhm.
tertiary customers too. Hence
Right.
why the store, when you walk in, it's very comfortable for me, who is not their target market, to go shop through. And it feels like they're talking to me, but I'm missing the nuance that they're speaking to in their commercials and they're speaking to in their communications that she is picking up on.
Mhm.
And I think that's an amazing thing. And that's where so we did consumer surveys, and we tried to understand what people were seeing in the market at late 21 or late 20 rather,
Yeah.
as we were planning the design of what Northern Helm was going to look like. And it was leveraging the cafes, leveraging the grocery store feel, because the beautiful thing about that is we could create an environment that was speaking to a similar customer to what Loblaws is speaking to without alienating the 25-year-old male who
Right.
who was already the customer coming in to shop, without alienating the 65-year-old that has grandkids,
Mhm.
and looking at it that way of we wanted to create something that would stand the test like 10 years from now, would be there,
Right.
and while not alienating the person that is coming through the doors now. So
Mm.
we need to ensure the products that we have on hand are it and the way we're communicating and the training that goes in with our teams matches the person that's coming through today, but does a really great job of communicating to who our target market is long term.
Man, there's it's the way you explain it simplifies it, but there's a lot of complex solutioning going on there, right? So I've done my time in advertising, and understanding a consumer or helping a brand understand their consumer, their target demographic was obviously step one. But in this industry, it's much like Loblaws in that case, right? If you go into a Zehrs or whatever, they're catering to so many different consumer types, and all of those profiles are different, which is not unlike cannabis, right? Because and it made sense, the mid 20s, early 30s male, yeah, predominantly I would say at the beginning, and I think we're still missing, although times are changing a little bit, that the female demographic or your senior demographic, right, which you're trying to target, which is that's tough. I think stigma still is probably part of the reason behind that. But how do you survive that mid-size retailer squeeze, right? And it's got to be tough because you already mentioned Mike 1922. Mike kills it, but it wasn't rainbows and puppy dogs out of the gate, right? There was competition, then there's black market, then there's another legal competitor next door as well, and and then adding logistics and delivering. Like it's chaos at a mass scale. Take a a Value Buds or a Canna Cabana. They've got massive teams. They've got massive pockets in some cases. May not be profitable, but still,
Don't ask
um,
that question.
yeah, we won't ask that question. But you're in that mid scale, right? And what does that take to survive? Because I would assume you've got roll up pressure and downward pressure, right? So Northern Helm, J Supply, from what I understand, doing very well. It would open up the opportunity for an acquisition at some point in time when those others come knocking with their maybe not well run or managed portfolios, but somehow scrape money together. Just curious what that's like.
Well, I actually think those other portfolios are, on the whole, extremely well run.
Mm,
Just the amount of coordination that needs to go into that many stores is phenomenal, and it's great that we're seeing that level of scale there. It's not the it's not the path that we're currently on, but it's great that it's there, and retail at maturity in most markets, it's 75% is controlled by 3 players, 15% is controlled by the next biggest player, and then mom and pops with 10%.
right.
Like, that tends to be how it is, like, that first 90% for 4 players. Not
So
crazy
we're
to
not
think that.
sorry to interrupt. So we're not quite there then, really. I mean, we're looking
No.
what 3,500 ish, give or take, retail locations throughout Canada. I think the largest, oh, is it SNDL with their value buds and stuff? I think it might be. And then
I
second to
I
that
don't know
might
where
be High
Fika
Tide.
sits, like, them being
All
private,
right,
it's
Fika.
unclear their
So
total,
let's just say
store
we've
count,
got, yeah. We've got
but they're
so
beasts.
Fika, SNDL, and High Tide kind of sitting at the top there. I mean, that I guess would put it, 600, 700, 800 stores somewhere in there. So we're not quite there yet.
No.
I
No,
would
we're a
suspect
ways
we
away.
will. Yeah.
And to be clear, that's not necessarily saying all of Canada will be like that, because even we
Right.
see that in
Each
grocery and in
market's
coffee.
different.
It's
Yeah.
more market specific, but you still have the Loblaws and the Empire in grocery.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
They're monsters.
Mhm.
Um, but tying back to being a medium sized operator, we need to do a really good job in the markets that we're operating in. We we launched with Northern Helm. We launched with leveraging the licensee model, which is a model that I launched with the Tokyo Smoke, not too dissimilar to a franchising model, but the licensee has more autonomy to manage their menu, manage their teams, and really drive the business forward. And why we wanted to run with that was the local knowledge, and that was something back from the coffee days. It's like a franchisee in the middle of Ohio knows his or her town better than I'm ever going to know his or her town. And
Mhm.
they're going to be involved in the community. They're going to have people that they can hire, and they're going to be able to speak to people that isn't measurable. And that has gone a long way in our development. And you look at, so we were able to get 6 stores open relatively quickly, with local operators under the
Mhm.
Northern Helm banner. But even still, we were waiting on crazy COVID delays and, like,
Oh,
things that
yeah.
were outside of our control and outside of our partners' control. And I was talking to Nick and Christos at J Supply Co. at the time, like, they're sitting there, they're waiting on getting stores open too because of these delays. Hey, it makes more sense to come together and combine some of that back end, so
Mhm.
that, or they bought us, combine some of that back end to make sure that everything that we're focused on is what the customer is worried about, and we're not duplicating effort on any of the back end elements.
Right.
And while we're going along, it's like, well, it's difficult to do a really great job of serving customers in Thunder Bay under corporate stores. And we had amazing teams up there. But could we do a better job if we sold those Thunder Bay stores so that we could focus on the Southern Ontario locations? And then now that those stores are open and in place, we start to buy back the stores from certain licensees. They're like, this was awesome. We made lots of money. We've had fun, but we're ready to go on to the next phase. Like, great.
Mm.
Now we know that those stores are operating. We have a good relationship with the whole team. We're able to bring those back in house. So I think from our perspective, there's a lot of dancing between the raindrops and being opportunistic as we're rolling along, and not getting too tied into one method of operating.
Mhm.
Recognizing that we are small, so we better be flexible, because if we only do what everybody else is doing, it's going to be a pretty rough day for us.
Yeah, no doubt. Man, So with the J Supply, J Holdings, Northern Helm, can you break that down? Because I still get confused, even though Nick and I are close. We don't even really get into that much. We don't talk cannabis that much anymore. But yeah, I just so
Oh,
because
we need to
because
go
you
for
rolled up
smash
Northern Helm.
burgers in Woodstock and get into that.
There, we got to do that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so how is that set up right now? Is it still a licensing model, or do you have certain stores that came back in and you're overseeing them now? They're part of J Holdings and Northern Helm, or how does that?
Yeah, so the JSY Holdings has the brand, it has the IP for both brands.
Okay,
So
yeah.
for the JSY co-brand and the Northern Helm brand. Um, they're all licensed stores, but we are in the midst of we bought back some of the Northern Helm locations in the Durham region, bought 50% of them back, and are in the midst of buying back the other 50%. They were 50/50 owners. Um, they're amazing people and crushed it getting it open. They're looking to move on to other things. It's a nice payday for them. We get to inherit their phenomenal stores. So
Mhm.
that is definitely working out. The Toronto locations are still licensed with the same operators that open those stores. They're amazing people. Psyched to be working with them. Guelph is a licensed location. Interestingly, that one was opened as a corporate location,
Mm.
and it was opened just after J Supply Holdings bought Northern Helm, and we got in there and
Oh,
we're
okay.
like, okay, well, these managers know Guelph better than anyone.
Mm.
So in why don't we spin this out into a license model, and they can operate with our tools, but they get the upside on it. Like they
Right,
get to
right,
control that
right.
whole upside. And that ended up being very lucrative for them, which we're psyched about. And then Kingston is also a licensed store, but that one is in the midst of being rolled up in corporately.
Wild, wild.
Yeah.
That's very cool.
So being
So
flexible where necessary.
yeah, 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 yeah. And I think that, you've given enough ownership to the individuals. Like you said, they know the markets, right? So who are you to dictate? Yeah, that's so you've been through a lot of M&A activity. You've seen a lot as well. You're an individual that pays very close attention to the industry. What are some of the lessons being learned? Like, and that's a pretty broad question. But outside of deal structure, anything like that, I've seen personally witnessed where there's acquisitions that happen and then all of a sudden there's a tank. And for whatever reason, there's too many variables to be able to count and hone in on. But yeah, I'm just curious what your take on the M&A activity, both in retail and on the cannabis side. And side note to that, you mentioned kombucha earlier. I just saw that Mario from Motif has bought Booch. And, and I'm like, okay, yeah, this makes sense. I mean, of course, but yeah, I don't know. Anyways,
Anything that guy gets into is going to be successful because he will run through walls.
and Booch has done decently well. I don't know the back end. I don't know any of the financials. I don't know any of that. But I'm a daily consumer of
There you
Booch.
go.
So yeah, Mario's not that far away. Like
Built-in customer here.
yeah, yeah, no doubt, no doubt. But anyways, lessons learned, real world lessons learned when it comes to M&A and how that transfers through cannabis and what we're seeing.
Uh, yeah, there's a ton there, and also I recognize there are a lot of people that are a lot smarter than me to give answers on this. So I'll caveat that. Uh, it's never as quick as you want it to be.
Mm,
That's it, and when there's always talk of M&A, everybody's always looking, and that's always a discussion, and it can be an amazing distraction from your core
mm,
business. So certainly there are times where you need to look at opportunities, but also say no as quickly as possible if it doesn't make sense,
yeah.
because these things can drag out, and we've certainly seen that where deals have dragged out, and like we've witnessed it in the market where deals have dragged out, and like the public deals, and then it get dropped. There was one yesterday, I think, Simply Solvent List. They had
Yeah.
gone through and announced it, and you can imagine the amount of work and effort that went into getting
Yeah.
that deal to the line. And good on them. There was probably something in due diligence that the reason that they walked away, but there's
Mhm.
a lot of effort that goes into that, um, and none of the information is going to be perfect.
Right.
There's very much a gut check as you're going through. It's I think in school they tried to teach us so much, like, oh, get all the information and then make a decision, and everything has to fit perfectly into this deck. It's like, no, you need to decide whether you're going to go through with the transaction, and, and when the transaction is done, regardless of the deck and the spreadsheet and how it all looks, you need to make sure that it was a success.
Yeah.
It's the operations side of it is, for me, far more important than the actual deal structure going through, because the deal structure, there's only so many ways that you can skin a cat.
Mm.
Um, but then working with it afterwards and not worrying about what could have been or should have been. It's like, we're here now and let's move forward.
Yeah. It's funny because I always look at it from like a Dragon's Den or Shark Tank perspective, right? So great pitch, let's do some business, but then the due diligence happens, and I've been, I've been part of some M&A activity. Things look great on paper until you get
Oh,
into a
so
data
good.
room, and then you go into the data room and you're downloading financials and you're looking at, you know, cost of goods, you name it, doesn't matter. And it's like, what the fuck? But meanwhile, there's already been an announcement. There's been some high fives happening. And for some, they just don't move away from it quick enough. They keep kicking that can down the road, kicking it down the road. And then either the public forgets or whatever happens. And sometimes, especially in the early days, we saw a lot of this. It was literally for a press release, right? And they knew the deal wouldn't happen, but it was announced anyways. And obviously, when you get into SEC side of things, that's a little bit different. But yeah, you make a good point. Is you thinking of the school days, man, so strange this industry at times.
But on that, incentives matter. If
Yes.
if you are being personally, and in the case that I think you're referring to, if you're being personally incentivized to announce a deal, whether it's your stock price is going to go up and you happen to own a bunch of that stock, or whether you're going to get some kind of bonus to get through that transaction, you
Mhm.
are personally incentivized to get that press release out.
Yes.
And
Yes.
then you're incentivized, regardless of what that data room looks like, to get it done. So the incentives really matter going through.
I agree. I agree. So listen, there's one here that I really want to make sure that I hit with you, and it's building that brand aligned retail experience because right now, so J Supply ran a certain way, Northern Helm, you had your aesthetics, understanding your customer demographic, but how do you? Because I've been in a few where, and some models just aren't like this at all, where the stores aren't designed the same. Maybe the staff isn't even necessarily trained the same, but it's under the same banner. How do you ensure that you build brand alignment across the locations or across the store locations?
I think that's a constant effort, and we're by no means doing it perfectly, and we're always adjusting what we're doing. We still have a long way to go on that, and I think we get to look to uh, bigger retail players that have been doing this for a long time and try to learn from them constantly. Like Starbucks does it so well
Oh
with
yeah,
that
yeah.
constant training happening. Uh, it starts at what information's going through on the back end. So we spend a ton of time, like Jeff, who runs our day to day, he he is seeing everything that's going through. We have an analytics team that's actually third partied out, but we've worked with Emil since Tokyo Smoke days, uh, and and we're digging into transaction level detail at all the stores on a weekly basis, and then on a monthly basis, speaking with each of the leadership teams, going through pages and pages of detail, looking at what products were sold, what the consumers were doing, how to best understand what is happening in the stores,
Mm.
and then you get into an Alpine IQ and how long it's been since a transaction has occurred with a specific guest. There's a lot of information there, but it's presenting it in a way that the team understands. And again, we're not perfect at this. We'll get better next month, and hopefully we'll get better next month. And anything we make a mistake
At
on,
least you're improving and understanding that.
we'll see where it is. So I think that's very, very important, because like we're 4 years into most of these locations that are operating under our umbrella. So that initial training was a long time ago, and it was the same group doing that initial training, and they did a phenomenal job. But a lot of team members have cycled through. We have lower turnover than the majority of stores, but there still is turnover. So it's then getting back to retraining, and but retraining on the fly
Mm.
and having the communication out about what incentives are happening this month, what promotions are going on for customers to get psyched about. It's as much as possible giving the team members the tools to just focus on what the customer is looking for,
Mm.
and not thinking about other things. Because if they're worried about a million other things, as with any of us, if I was worried about like taking notes on my laptop at the same time as having this discussion, I'm not going to do as good a job engaging
Right.
with you right now.
Thank you for
Uh,
not.
yeah, I'm hoping you're recording this, so
Yeah.
we'll be able to look back at it afterwards anyway. Uh, but we'll see. Time will tell on that too.
Yeah.
Uh, so I think it's a constant review of ourselves and what is working and what is not working, and leveraging the data that we have available to us. We go to painstaking detail on the data, and I think our team definitely bats above its weight class on that front.
That's awesome. Let me ask you this while we're on that. Where is all the turnover? I'm seeing a ton of posts lately. Close with Jamie at High Buds Club, and she's talking about Budtender turnover. She raised some really good points lately about wages. I don't think it's wages necessarily myself. Now I haven't dug into it. I don't know if it's people getting in because they think it's cool and then go, "Fuck, this is just still retail."
It's
This isn't
retail.
really it's retail. And the reason I say that is I see the same individuals that, outside of cannabis, they've been in retail, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 years. There's some longevity at least. But in cannabis, the turnover, that churn rate is much higher. It can't be just wages. Now I get management, structure, I understand all of that, but where do you think that's coming from outside of wages? Maybe it is just wages. I don't know.
Uh, So to be clear, I haven't seen data on other stores for the reasons why. So I know that just anecdotally, or from some industry reporting actually, that we are lower turnover, and we take a lot of pride in the teams that are in the stores and the number of people that have been here in
Well,
these
you're
stores since.
training them. That's step one. That's good.
Well, and having some sort of communication over what their progression is going to look like on the team, and then showing that progression, and having everybody in the organization know that somebody has progressed
Mm,
within the organization is huge, because like we just work with phenomenal people. I'm pretty lucky on a day to day basis. The people that I get to work with. Um, I think wages at the end of the day, it does tie in. So the economy is tough right now. We know that everything is getting more expensive. One could argue from an economics perspective that part of the reason why things are getting more expensive is because the minimum wage has been spiking so much as a percentage recently. So that is going to make everything in retail more expensive. We definitely stay ahead of that. We definitely are clear on what those wages are at various points in your career within our organization, and different responsibilities and how that ties out to wages. So I think I think for the most part, we're able to get around that, and we tie our incentives for the teams very closely to that, and the leadership teams very closely to that. Uh, but I think communication is huge on the whole situation. So that communication, the training, feeling the team feeling like they're involved in what the path forward is.
mm.
It, the big retailers that have done really well, they keep that communication going. They keep that ongoing training happening. They ensure that folks have the opportunity to progress within their organization and make it clear what that looks like. It's as with anything, if we get on the same page about something, you're not going to think that you're going to be out in the cold tomorrow. Uh,
Right, right.
if you know what the path forward is, like Tom, there is not a promotion today, but we're having a review in 3 months, and this is what we need you to focus on to get to that point. Having that discussion goes a long way with any of us. So, like,
Mhm.
we're all human. We want to feel that connection.
Yeah.
So I think that's a big thing, and I'm sure there's some difficult situations that people are working through. Like if you've got if you got issues with a store being robbed and there's only one individual working, that's scary. Like
Yeah,
that's nightmare fuel, and I
yeah.
mean that in all sincerity. I don't want anybody to go through that. And we can talk about window coverings and such. The rules are the rules, and
Mhm.
they're there, so we have to work within them. And yeah, there's a lot of pieces that go into this, and it is amazing. Most people that get into cannabis retail, they like cannabis. So if there's a discount on cannabis for team members, that goes a long way.
That could help. Yeah, that could certainly help. How do you, as you're explaining that, I'm thinking through the mindset of a bud tender as close as I can get to it. And not all created equal. Some of the result of, their employment and, the training. On average, any location across the banners, how many SKUs are you guys carrying at one location? Just on average?
About 650.
650.
Yeah.
That's a lot more than the vast majority of retail
Well, you
outside
had
of
Chris
cannabis.
Jones on here.
Well, Chris has a different model, right? Like
I know. I
it's
love Chris.
completely different.
I always make fun of the size of his location. That
I've
Brampton
thought
location is
about it
wild.
thinking if I were to get into it without the bells and whistles, the big blowout, that's probably the way I would do it myself is, go, again, background in real estate. So I'm going to be shopping the deal. Where's the location? What's just big enough? Where am I going to get the eyeballs? Is the traffic there? Stock what they need and then focus on that. And Chris is again, his model is completely different, but 650 there is no possible way unless you've got some genius, right? And they see all the formulas running in front of their eyes. They're not going to remember all of the different products. How are you ensuring? And you guys are big on training. This is why I'm asking you this: is how are you ensuring they either have one being trained on certain products, and is the onus on the brand? Okay, that's part one of the question. But two is how are you ensuring that they become familiar? That because there's just no way. Are you using tools, technologies? Like what are they doing when you stump? We should do a thing called stump the Budtender or something. I don't know, something along those lines. Just 650, man, that's a lot. And
That's a
they're
lot.
broken across six categories, I guess, in a way ish. Um, how do you do that? How do you ensure that the bud tenders are up to speed with it? That those products that you've decided I'm bringing these into the store, which means you need to move them, which means they need to be recommended because
Mhm.
not everyone knows what they're looking for.
Yeah, that's a constant balance, certainly. I think first of all, we're very lucky. We've got an awesome team, so that goes a long way. Everybody wants to learn.
That's the coach's answer.
No,
David,
like
come
they're
on.
so good.
Everyone performed well on the ice tonight. We have no.
Uh, Not the Leafs last night.
Yeah.
I noticed you haven't been wearing your Vancouver hat recently, but
Yeah, it doesn't feel
yeah.
right now.
Um,
Oh man,
but
salt.
in all seriousness on that, yes, there are a ton of SKUs and they're constantly moving in and out. Um, and and the team members being there, if a team member has been at the store for a number of years, there's a much higher likelihood that they are going to have a good sense of 600 of those 650 or 300 of those 650 than
Mhm.
somebody that is new off the street yesterday. So so that longevity of tenure goes a very long way from a product knowledge within our locations and within any location. That could be the same if you're working in a coffee shop or a grocery store. You're just going to understand it better because reps go a long way. So that's a big piece. Then if we're bringing in new products, we work with the banners and we work with Sharif and or sorry the brands and we work with Sharif to ensure that we're getting we're getting samples. Uh,
Mhm.
it at the end of the day, the OCS will keep doing those studies of like, oh, what are consumers shopping on? And constantly the top item is quality, except consumers can't describe what they are defining as quality. And because, well, what is it? Like, how does that happen?
Yeah.
Well, interestingly, we think that there's a lot that comes down to brand. So when they hear when they hear 1964, they think, oh, that's a Rubicon Organics. That's quality.
Mhm.
Or, and this is the higher likelihood thing, it's something that the team members trust. The bud tender has tried and says this is awesome. Getting that stamp of approval only happens if a sample happened.
Right. Right.
So leveraging technology, we have an intranet. Like we have created a much bigger structure than for the size of our network. We have obviously hundreds of SOPs that are tied into that for every element of the business. But we also have videos of product knowledge training for
Mm,
products that are coming in, and when those new products are coming in, or there's a limited time offer on something, it's tied to that and it is visible to everyone in the store.
nice.
So the support is there. And if we want to do some kind of promotion with a group, the expectation is that the collateral is happening in the stores so that customers are seeing it without seeing it sometimes because it's the idea of billboards. We're not always recognizing that we're noticing it, but we're consuming it unconsciously.
Mhm.
And the team members are getting the samples so they can actually speak to the product.
Yeah. It's, man, there's I'm just thinking through so many brands that fail at this, and the subconscious is a very powerful thing, right? And this is where on our high flyer side, we've got some brands that take massive advantage of our swag collabs. They're sending out swag to retail locations. Other brands are like, yeah, I just don't see the point. I'm like, if they're wearing the shirt, man, like, outside the sample is
It
funny because I
helps.
just, everything helps. Everything helps in this industry right now. Until we see reform in marketing, whatever it might be, you have to do and pull every lever you can, I think. But I just started watching High Hopes. I don't know if you've seen that series. It's like the stoner MMD franchising going on in, I
Mm.
think it's LA. I think that's where they are. But when they want to bring a new product into the store, it's much different than here in Canada, at least in Ontario for sure.
Mhm.
There's bags of flour. They're not always branded. They're like just, and they sit around and they try the product. I don't see a lot of that happening, and I think part of it is just due to the regulation of such. But at the same time, you've got a brand. Give some advice to where I'm trying to go with this, David. Is give some advice to the brand because Jazz ran the Dope Box. You've got Jamie with the Flight Club. I think or the Flight Box. I forget what that's. Sorry, Jamie. And then you've got I think O2O does one. There's different sample boxes, but outside of that, I mean, if a brand reaches out to you, right? Whatever the banner may be, they could have 100 brands, they might have just one. Should they be supplying enough for the entire team? Sometimes you only see one dube tube with a single dube in there, and maybe it's got to go around a joint circle. I don't know. Just give some advice to brands that are looking for distribution.
Well, I think there's a cost to everything. So everything that I'm going to say here comes with a caveat because we were talking earlier the largest LPs versus the craft, and
Yeah.
need to recognize that budgets are tight for everyone
Yeah.
on a relative basis. So if we're talking about a craft grower and they're like, well, how do we get more distribution? It's like, well, look what Grant did with Light Label. He didn't
Yes.
have distribution. He just got in his car and he had samples. And no, he didn't have samples of everything, but he hit like 150 stores
Yeah.
in a 3-week period. And he had a couple samples of the hero product that he was coming down the line with, and that was it. And I'm not saying that other brands don't do that. It's just like that mentality was like exemplary.
Right.
I
Right.
think is where it comes down to, is like having that conversation. And that is not always possible. Say you're from BC and you're trying to get into the Ontario market, it's difficult, but send one product that you're really proud of, whether it's like a couple of those single pre-rolls, send them as samples. That goes a very long way. And then engage in the product knowledge side of things.
Mhm.
Like I think back to when we were starting these stores, it's like Purple Hills, uh, like Peter had a webcam and was showing how they're creating the concentrates. And that was that was the product knowledge. Do you not think every team member on our team that got to watch that and see somebody that was so amped to show off their product and so proud of the product they were making wanted to try that product afterwards? Absolutely. And of
Yeah.
course, then samples came as part of it. So there are ways without spending a bunch of money to get that knowledge out there. It's not always just taking the buyer out. It's like let's have the support for the products that are going into the stores at the ground level, at the team member level, because they're the ones having the conversation with the customer. And ultimately, if the team members are not excited about something, it will sit on the shelf. And if it
Yeah.
sits on the shelf, it's not getting ordered again.
Man, that's I think that's what everyone needs to hear because there's the flood of emails that come in, right? That come from some of these brands. Some of them you've already built a relationship, you trust, right? And you're like, okay, pretty much anything that they drop, our bud tenders, they believe in you, they believe in your brand. Chances are we're going to move it.
And how
Um,
did they build that though? How did they get there in the first
right,
place?
and but it took all of that, like you're saying, Purple Hills, great example. And I think that it there's certain formulas that work very well, but just I hate this the term, think outside of the box. But again, it's that wasn't being done really. Product knowledge sessions, High Buds Club, they do theirs, which is great. But I think that it really needs to be at the retail banner level as well, where you're going in. Maybe you're I thought of this the other day, and it's because my wife went to I think it was CanPrev Nutraceuticals. They put on a like a lunch and learn type of thing, and it was presentation about the products, and I'm like, Why the fuck aren't we doing this in cannabis? Like, so maybe I will. I don't know, but there has to be some sort of interaction, something to get you excited about, as you say. Otherwise, it's just not going to happen. And joint circle after watching High Hopes, I think that makes a lot of sense too. There was something funny that came out of that, which was they're testing products and they're like, which one do you like better? They're like, definitely A, definitely A. They're like, they're the exact same products.
Love that. Love
Right?
that.
So it goes to show that, maybe you should smoke, wait, sober up, then smoke,
Then
sober
try
up
again.
again. I wanna understand the future of retail because, there's a lot of momentum with SEO and e-com and delivery. Works in certain regions, other regions maybe not so much. But I'm curious on what the in-store experience needs to look like for the future, but also online, and what is that going to look like? Because I don't are across any of your banners, are you doing e-com delivery? Are you doing any of
Yeah,
that right now? You are, okay.
yeah.
That's what I
Durham
thought.
region,
Yeah,
we've got a pretty big presence
Durham.
on delivery. We're just rolling out Uber Eats in Toronto too. So
Okay, okay. So,
and,
yeah, I
and in
guess.
Guelph, sorry, Guelph, not with Uber Eats yet, but that will happen
Okay,
soon.
okay. All right. So, obviously, it's important. I think that as Mike had explained perfectly for me, is there's a demographic that just doesn't want to go to the store. And it's not always because they just don't want to be seen going in the store. I mean, we got to continue with the decreasing the stigmatism in this industry, right? Like it is
Hmm.
just ridiculous. And the last thing, oh, there goes teacher so and so or professor so and so into the cannabis store. Shame, right? Like it's horrible. So there is that demographic that's going to go online. They're going to order delivery. Great. There is, I think, a growing side of that as well. But what does the future of in-store look like? And then contrast that against what e-com, SEO, delivery, and the importance of all of that looks like.
I think in retail in general, consumers are becoming more and more used to being able to look at something online and either purchase it online or go into the store and have a seamless experience from that online through the signs that they see out front through to the communication and finish their transaction in store.
Mm.
That needs to be there whether we're selling cookies or whether we're selling cannabis. And I recognize the cookies, the cannabis bread. Uh, it just has to work, and it we know that we can't calculate exactly how many people have gone online before they end up in our stores, but we know it's more than 50%, and
Mhm.
it's likely significantly more than 50% of the actual transactions because people are checking and they're looking to understand what they have and recognizing that, as with anything, it's the consumers that are most interested in your products that are going to be doing that. So whether they're looking online to order online or looking online to make sure that you have something or doing some kind of product research, and it might not be on our website, it could be
Mm.
somewhere else. It could be on the OCS, it could be on Reddit, it could be on any number of sites that are out there. Uh, so having that consistent experience and yes, there are the folks that are working with Stack and working really hard on that. And then there are folks like us that we don't have the budget to run with a bread stack at this time. So let's do a really good job with our Dutchy menus and make sure that the banners are done properly and make sure that
Mm.
the products, when you're seeing the menus in store, they are consistent. And when you're having the conversations with the team members know what is on the website so that that through line can be there.
Yeah.
Um, I think good retail is always going to be important. Like good physical retail is always going to be important, but that does not mean that e-com is not more important, and vice versa. It's
Mm.
like um, eh, there are going to be situations where we'll make decisions that it doesn't make sense to add another physical retail store because we can do a really good job with delivery. And every time you're looking at a new location, that decision will be part of the conversation, and that
Yeah.
discussion will be there. But we need to keep getting better at that, recognizing that um, we've made some mistakes, and we'll try to learn from those mistakes going forward.
Yeah. Man, I do it myself. Like if there's a certain product now, typically it's cued from I'm looking for a certain product. But again, I'm in the space. And I think this is where we need to understand as operators in this space, we're kind of an echo chamber, right? The Instagram, the LinkedIn, all of this going on. So I see a new product drop or something like that. I'm like, great. Who has it locally? Okay. Then I go there and I find it. And then the transfer saw, oh, I saw that you had this online. But the biggest upset when you're talking about continuity is it says you've got it online. They're like, nope, we don't have any. I'm like, are you fucking kidding? Like, what is going on here? Now, for me, hailing from tech and understanding the industry as well, I get why that there's discrepancies, but it pisses me off, even though I have some lenience because I'm in the industry. I couldn't imagine as a consumer. And you talk about making sure that your Dutchy menus, everything is there. there will come a point, I'm sure, where consumers are taking more interest. They're, maybe they're following the brands, not, and probably just a few of their favorites. If you were in the alcohol side, or, people follow Red Bull or Monster, or, if you're into MMA or whatever, following some of that or whatever, right? And I think that the consumer demographic will start to pick up a bit more where they are following these brands. And they don't have to be an all day stoner, doesn't matter, right? They enjoy the brand. Maybe it's a No Future, maybe it's a 1964, whatever it might be. So they start following the brand, they see a new drop, then they're looking for the product. The problem is that it's so general on search results right now when it comes to that SEO. I may be getting served product menus from BC and I'm in Ontario in some cases because their SEO game is so on point.
Yep.
Um, and yeah, I get it. You're trying to do what you can, but I just see opportunities for technology still when it comes to that, but it's also on the operations side, which is, are we continuing to so one of the points though that you brought up, David, was ensuring that the bud tender or the staff is aware of what's online as well or on the menus. Again, 600-ish, 650-ish SKUs, that's going to be tough. Um, your questioning of a consumer entering a store, what does that look like? What brought you in today? Are you looking for a certain product? Did you see something online? Was it something like, what does that look like?
Like, we need to keep it open when they're coming into the store. So, uh, I wanna counter just your question with another question for
Yeah.
context. It's how many different grocery stores do you go to?
I go to two, but generally one.
Okay, and then how many different coffee shops if you're a coffee drinker? How many kombucha shops do you go to?
Well, none, but
Yeah.
I get what you mean. Like, so, I'm probably going to go to one, but but if I
No,
bring that back
but
to
I think
loyalty,
that's no, that's really important here. So, I think those are those are mature industries, and
Mhm.
you've had the time to shop at other stores, and you have decided that there are 1 or 2 grocery stores that you're gonna go to, and chances are from a grocery perspective, you're not gonna check that something's there because you trust that it's going to be there.
Right? Yes.
And from a coffee perspective, you trust that they have espresso in stock
Oh,
because if
nothing pisses me off more when they
oh,
go,
like,
"Oh, the dark roast, oh, we're not brewing that anymore today." I barely drink coffee out of the home.
yeah,
And when I go to get it, "Oh, we don't have that right now."
yeah, so I think what we're driving towards is, becoming part of if we're going to hit maturity, we're going to be a part of your routine.
Mm,
Like, if we've done our jobs really well a few years from now, you'll be checking our website for new products that are on hand, and you're not doing a search for a new product specifically. You're doing a search on Google or wherever you search. You're doing that search within our website, and I think
mm,
any retailer is looking to have that loyalty and build that loyalty. So once we talk about that online, but then the loyalty after the transaction is very, very important. How does that follow on happen? How do we ensure that Tom is happy with his output? And certainly not going to be happy if the dark roast wasn't available and he expected it to be there. So
that's
we
right.
we need to have that dark roast there. And after he's had that dark roast, is there a follow-on email that has to go through? Is there a follow-up a couple weeks later? It's like, hey Tom, we haven't heard from you. You haven't got your dark roast from us. Come on by. We've got a
Mm,
fresh pot here for you.
yeah,
So I
yeah.
think that is such a big piece of creating that loyalty because we talked at the start about it takes 15 years to get any sense of maturity in a market from a product and a retail perspective. In 15 years, I don't know that, well, you're in the space and you're a curious person, so you will go to a lot of different stores, but I don't necessarily think that all consumers will be that way.
Yeah. Wow. I didn't really I see, this is what I love about what I get to do is there's always something new that challenges my thought on something. So, because I've said this before and asked the question, is there any loyalty in cannabis? Now I need to separate it, right? Now I need to separate it from, is there loyalty to a brand in comparison to loyalty to retail? So you've been to Woodstock, we've got what, five, six, dispensaries now. I'm loyal to 1.5, right?
There you go.
If someone doesn't have it, it's not always the best experience. They just have the selection I'm looking for, the product I'm looking for, and the staff is no bullshit, right? They're not trying to sell me something I don't want necessarily, and that's not to say, I mean, in retail environments, you're always trying to up the cart size, right? So maybe I'm not the best person to try and do that with because I know specifically what I'm looking for, but when you compare it to the grocery store model or the coffee model, it makes a lot of sense, even to the point where it's location. So let's say I love Northern Helm. I visit this one all the time. Ah, shit, I'm out for whatever, a hockey tournament this weekend. I got to be there. Oh, there's no Northern Helm. What's the closest thing to it? So maybe location changes, right? Yeah, man, you're blowing my mind with a way to look at that now. But I think that some retailers, well, their 5-year lease is coming up. I was going to say some retailers aren't just going to be able to do this. Take us through the importance of that loyalty now, then. So, and I've criticized, but I've also, you know, boasted about certain retailers that do it very well. I try to every time I go into a new city, new location, here's my cell phone number, here's my email address.
Amazing.
Literally one company has ever taken advantage of it. And I don't know why. I'm still struggling with the why. Um, but talk about that customer loyalty when it comes and from, but more so from your perspective as Northern Helm J Supply on how do you maintain it? How do you create it? How do you ensure it has longevity and staying power?
Yeah, well, I think to answer the first part of your question there, loyalty is expensive to do well.
Mm,
And having a team and being able to pump that out, every message that you're getting costs that retailer money. And I'm sure you and I are on the same platform that is getting 5 or 6 of those messages a week
right.
from that one retailer, and they have the balance sheet to be able to do it. Um, when we looked at loyalty when we were rolling up and launching the stores, but again, I stepped back and like, what did we do in coffee? And my region in the U.S. happened to be the test bed for where we were launching the Tim Hortons app initially.
Mm,
And the very clear thing that I saw looking at the data was the locations that had used a stamp card or a punch card before rolling out the digital app had a way quicker uptick of people willing to use the app because they're used to,
they're
okay,
used
well,
to that interaction. Yeah.
my eighth coffee is going to be free. Like that was the mindset that was
Yeah.
already going on. And if you remember, if you have that app, it ended up being that direct crossover. And when it launched in Canada, they hadn't done anything like that in
Mm,
advance. And like I was living in Toronto, but like working in the US and back and forth. And it's like, okay, I'll test a couple of the stores here when they launched the app. Nobody was doing it, and they actually had to pull it back and then relaunch it with it having done a more manual version of it in certain
wow.
locations to try and get people in comfortable in the platform. Now look at cannabis, and you take it one step further, and in the loyalty that we're talking about, so more like a grocery loyalty or other forms of retail loyalty, where that communication and you want that to happen. Well, that means that you need to already be in the system. You
Mm,
need to give that phone number or the email to gain that benefit of the loyalty platform. Well, you it's a bit of a cart before the horse. So you need to start spending thousands and thousands of dollars of rolling out a digital loyalty platform and then try to add people on.
yeah.
So instead, we ended up doing years of adding people into our POS as part of the loyalty, but you're getting a punch card.
Mm,
So we did years of the punch card. In fact, up until tomorrow, most of the stores will have been on the punch card, and like that will be the case for a couple of the stores for another couple months. We had the punch cards, and we gained that loyalty. So now we have thousands of people that trust us to hold their data, and that we're
right.
not going to spam them, and we'll send out the general emails tied to promotions that are coming down the line. And we've been using it with a punch card. Now we're converting over to the digital, but we built that trust before doing it. And we have thousands of people that can launch right into that. So we have the information to be able to make that investment, hopefully pay out right away. So at least we can
Mhm.
communicate to people the way they want to be communicated with. And having a number of different stores under different entities, it's like, okay, well, we launched digital loyalty in Kingston over a year ago. We broke a lot of things like that was part of it. It was like,
Yeah.
great. It didn't, these are the things that didn't work. We ended up going with a different provider for it, for the launch of the next one. And, and that cycle. So it's not expecting that your loyalty platform is going to be perfect on day one because there's a huge amount of investment, but we definitely made it so that we walked before we ran with it.
Yeah, that's smart. And as you were explaining that, I'm thinking through that certain customer profiles may not trust that you want or that do not want to give you that information. Again, part of it tied to stigma,
Yep.
right? And oh, it's cannabis. Um, But I see that opportunity. One of the reasons I laughed, I was thinking through a Seinfeld episode where Elaine needed this stupid sub or whatever the hell it was, and she didn't even like them, but there was a tactile response to getting your card punched in those days, right?
Yeah.
And I wonder if things change because it goes all digital. Um, Listen, man, it's been great. I'm sure we could go on for hours, and we will. We'll have you back on. Looking forward to seeing you in town when you get this way, or when I get up towards you. Um, Leave us with a bit of wisdom, though, when it comes to this industry, right? And that's a very broad and general question for a reason. I like you to be able to think of what you want to leave us with.
Well, that's tough.
It is tough. That's why I do it. See, I
Yeah. I don't I think there's a lot of people with a lot more wisdom than me. I'm
no,
fortunate
come
to
on.
get to listen to this show so that I hear some of that wisdom. Well, and thank you for bringing so much of this wisdom to the table and bringing so many stories to the table. Um, I think I think we need to keep driving towards that initial goal of being considered a CPG business
Mhm.
while remembering those that got us to the point of even being able to have that conversation.
Yeah, I like that, man. That's smart. Because there's a lot where they feel they get left in the past because of the corporate nature of where the industry's headed. It doesn't need to be that way, right? They can still be celebrated, but obviously the industry needs to mature, or we probably won't have one. Like, it's easy enough to pull the rug out. But anyways, David, listen, man, it's been awesome catching up with you. Understanding where Northern Helm and was born, but also what's going on with J Supply. Much success. Good luck with the loyalty rollout when it
Thank
comes
you.
to digital. We'll catch up on that. We'll just shoot some messages back and forth, because there is something about that. I remember collecting for newspapers when I was a kid. What a fucking horrible thing to put in the hands of an 8 year old, right? We want you to go to this house and get money from this person. Okay, no problem. Anyways, I appreciate you. I appreciate everything you're doing for the industry, man. It's been nice chatting with you.
Thank you for having me on. Thank you for continuing to push this forward.
Oh, thanks, bro.